Today is Thursday, July 21st, and it's time for the Chair's Daily Live. Happy Thursday. So, this week I said I was going to be focusing on candidates, but today I think it's important that I don't drag a candidate into this conversation, but I do talk about Governor Stitt and Secretary Walter's attack on education. So, um, I don't know that people are paying enough attention. I see some people paying attention, but that's folks in education. I think everybody needs to be paying attention to this because I am in agreement with a lot of folks that perhaps the dismal state of education in Oklahoma is why we can't get companies to move here. We've in Stitt's term, there have been a lot of high profile companies that have played with the idea of coming here. And then they act like we're in the top, in the top three consideration. And then we always lose out. Um, Most of you are watching me. You live in Oklahoma and you know that Oklahoma can be a great place and it can be a great place to raise a family and grow economically. However, if you are planning to move here and you were bringing a family or a spouse, you have to look at the whole picture. So, Canoe. Let's talk about Canoe. That's the plant that we're putting up there in, I call it not Inola, but Pryor, up in Pryor, that's supposed to be building these electric cars that I don't know that anybody's ever seen one on the road. We struck a deal, and then like seconds after we said, yeah, it's a deal, they said, oh, yeah, we don't know if we have enough money. And then they've pushed back the start date several times. Here's the thing about Canoe that's always bothered me is that we got the labor portion of that contract, but the management portion went to Arkansas. Is it because they think they can't find management level employees here in Oklahoma? I assure you that there are some, but if you read our headlines, it doesn't look like it. Now we have Panasonic, which we just lost to Kansas. Kansas has a higher tax rate, and there are things about Kansas. Kansas is fine, but one of the reasons that they said that they picked Kansas was because of its closeness or proximity to Texas, which tickles me because they have to drive through Oklahoma from Kansas to get to Texas. So they picked Kansas, and their excuse was the proximity to Texas. And that got me to thinking. Panasonic has written us off like we don't even count as a state. They're just saying they wanted to pick the closest state to Texas, and they just skipped all over Oklahoma and they picked Kansas. They don't even consider us as part of the United States, and I think some of our legislators would be happy with that, particularly our governor, since he keeps trying to run for president while he's governor. So I want to talk about his attempt to defund education because I believe that is what's keeping us from being able to grow. So there's something like 3,400 educators decided not to go back to the classroom at the end of the school year. And so far, only like 1,200 new educators are entering into the profession. That's a problem. And I wonder if it's because of this current governor and the Secretary of Education continuing to defund education. Everywhere you look, they are trying to defund education. They're trying to undermine education. They're trying to make education, I don't know, subordinate to everything that we do. It blows me away because education is supposed to be the great equalizer, and we don't want to be equal. I mean, we don't want to count. So I don't know if it's incompetence or corruption or a combination of both, but it is scary and it is depressing, and it's longstanding. It's not just the new thing. Whatever the new thing that you heard about, because there's a couple of things. I'm not real sure which new thing you're talking about. It's not the new thing. It's been a longstanding thing. So Epic charter schools. I know y'all are tired of hearing about Epic. I'm kind of tired of talking about Epic, but until they pay us back, we're going to keep talking about the corruption. I saw a post today that I thought was pretty good where somebody was talking about how bad Epic was and how bad Epic was for education. And I've known some fine teachers who taught at Epic. And so I don't want to condemn the teachers who are trying really hard or the students who whose families have decided that Epic is what they needed to do. Here's who I have a problem with. We audited Epic. The leaders of Epic misused taxpayer dollars. That's a problem. And so the quote that I saw was this guy said, my kid went to Epic when I was having trouble. I can't remember what his trouble was, but he said, and even when we do good, we do bad. So Epic has been helpful to some folks, but they were misusing tax dollars while they did it. So we can't say it's okay, let's let Epic keep doing what they're doing. And we can't say, let's go ahead and set up a whole bunch of other organizations that are just like Epic. We haven't figured out how to manage this. We haven't figured out how to hold them accountable and to create a whole bunch of other charter schools all over the place before we get this under investigation. I mean, under control is a problem. And yes, the founders of Epic have been arrested by the FBI. So it's not even just little old me, the chair of the Oklahoma Democratic Party, who has a problem with it. The feds have a problem with it. You guys have seen the mugshots. It's real. It's not just a Democratic ploy. It's real. So there's Epic. There's the CLO, which none of us even heard about unless we're involved in real estate or education. But there's the Office of CLO, which is the Commission of Land Office Management, which basically manages the real estate for schools. So the Stitt appointed secretary of that had to be fired because of double dealing. So, I mean, just even the innocuous parts of education, just managing the land still has corruption and cronyism attached to it. I'm not going to get into HB 1775, which is a made-up boogeyman, but that is a way of attacking education. Attacking transgender children and making that a big issue, thus sending all of these faux activists, or maybe they're real activists, to school boards and making that into a deal that's not even a real deal, that's making kids leave public schools, attacking public schools. The whole voucher scheme is an attack on public schools, and particularly an attack on rural students, as far as I'm concerned. There aren't that many private options in rural Oklahoma. So if we're taking money out of the formula, rural Oklahoma suffers. But so do kids that the private schools and the charter schools decide not to take. And they have limits. They have limits. They can decide not to take me because I have big eyes, or because I'm in my 50s, but they can decide not to take kids for whatever reason. They decide not to take kids because they're private. But the governor's going full steam ahead on trying to force vouchers down our throats. So the latest two things is the governor's demand audit of Tulsa public schools. This is nothing more than him attacking the second largest school district to make it into some big fight so that he can keep furthering his voucher scheme. Did something happen in Tulsa public schools? Absolutely, right? They had a guy step down for misusing funds. That wasn't a matter of Tulsa public schools misusing funds. They caught it on their own through an audit that they did on their own. They identified specifically who did it. He no longer works there, but let's audit the whole thing. That, which leads me to Ryan Walters' latest stunt, his latest big deal, right? He writes a letter. He writes a letter saying, hey, Tulsa Public Schools, you know that program that you have, the early childhood education program that services children from birth to 3 years old? I am not giving you that money until you, I'm not giving you that money until you make sure there's some accountability. I mean, he literally said there needs to be accountability measures put into place to ensure Tulsa Public Schools is acting according to the contract. So first of all, the contract has nothing to do with Tulsa Public Schools. But here's the thing that I think is funny. Class Wallet. Class Wallet is a program where the feds gave Oklahoma a set amount of money that we were supposed to use to help families as they navigated education through COVID. We put no safeguards. I don't want to see this just yet. We put no safeguards in that program. So parents were saying, my kids are at home. I'd like for them to have clean clothes. So I'm going to buy a washer and a dryer. You know what? If I'm going to have to homeschool, I can't do it just on some computers. I need to order a projector and update my screening room. I mean, if my kid is going to be at home, I might as well teach them some chores. I'm going to order a lawnmower. They bought TVs, projectors, vacuum cleaners, screwdrivers, washers and dryers, just all manner of stuff to the tune of over $652,000. I'm not talking about the pencils and papers and computers and printers, which they need, right? Not talking about that kind of stuff. I'm not even talking about laptops and desktops because not everyone had those in their homes. Not talking about that. I'm talking about Christmas trees. I'm talking about recliners, lawnmowers, washer and dryer. I'm talking about those are the kinds of things that folks went out. Now, I just can't believe that anybody was sitting at home saying, "Ooh, they gave us this money to help with education." I think that a lawnmower, a washer and dryer are that makes sense. But they went ahead and spent the money to the tune of over $652,000 because we had no safeguards. And Ryan Walters is telling Tulsa Public Schools that we're not going to help with programs for children from 0 to 3 years old because they need to make sure that they detail specifically all of the safeguards that they're going to put in place. Okay, so that's the stunt. And oh my, with the hypocrisy. Then we have, well, let's talk a little bit about the $652,000. So I just did a quick search because I wanted you guys to know that I'm not making this stuff up. Now we can pull that up. I'm not making this stuff up, just a real quick search. Feds investigate Oklahoma education. This is what I came up with. This is a quick search. So back in May, thanks to some stealthy reporters, we found out about this class wallet deal. So they did the audit. And now they've come out and said that there were 652,000 unallowable purchases, which is bad enough. But now they're saying, Oklahoma, you need to send us that money back. So because Stitt and Walters refused to put safeguards in place as they were supposed to, and there are emails, I don't want to hear all the crap about Walters didn't do it in his capacity as the education person. He did it as the nonprofit where he's making all of his money. He keeps talking about it as the Secretary of Education, so I'm going to hold him to it. He refused to put safeguards in, and we have the emails to prove that he refused to put safeguards in. And he has the nerve to be talking about what Tulsa Public Schools are doing. Now, thanks to their refusal to manage that appropriately with any kind of competence, 652,000 tax dollars have to be sent from Oklahoma back to the feds. That is in addition to the $2.9 million that we already sent back. So here we are at almost $3 million that the feds gave us to help Oklahoma students as they transitioned to try and keep being educated through COVID. It's costing us money. We're having to send back at the end of the day, nearly $3 million back to DC that we could have used to help folks. I mean, we could have taken that money. We didn't have to give it to folks and giving it to folks. I would have made sense if we put some safeguards, but we could have strengthened broadband in some communities. There are all kinds of things that we could have done instead of just saying, hey, it's a free for all, order a Christmas tree if you want to, because that's what we did. I'm getting quite a bit of pressure about what are we doing about this governor's race, and what about Joy Hoffmeister, and what about schools, and all of that kind of good stuff. And so that's why I'm talking about this today. And so I'm going to be very clear, very clear. Governor Kevin Stitt, Secretary Ryan Walters has shown us exactly who they are and what they care about with regards to education. Governor Stitt has shown us who he is and what he cares about oversight of any sort whatsoever, competence of any sort whatsoever. And I'll just remind you that we rank 49th in education and 50th in healthcare. Just want to make sure you get, and 51st in outcomes for women. Just to remind you of what this governor is doing. He has shown us what he is capable of. He has shown us what his priorities are, I think. Allowing this man to continue to be our governor will doom our state in ways that I don't think that we can imagine. And I'm not talking about voting against it solely, but this is an election where it is important enough to vote against it. Now, who we have as a candidate in Joy Hoffmeister, who has been in office, is there are no records of things under her oversight going without management, going without accountability, going without safeguards, or being swept under the rug. That's not what we have. What we have is a person who was elected and re-elected, who has learned, who has decided, who's come to the conclusion that the Republican Party no longer suits Oklahoma, no longer suits who she is. That's what we have. I think the choice is very clear. When somebody tells you who they are, you have to believe them. Governor Stitt has told us that he only cares about his friends and lining the pocketbooks of his friends or himself. We see it over and over and over. Joy Hoffmeister has told us, lifelong Republican, I have looked at this party and it is no longer my party. I am now a Democrat. And for the people who say, I don't trust it, here's what I'm going to tell you. You know Oklahoma Republicans. Some are in your family, some of them are your neighbors. They wouldn't take her back if she wanted to go back at this point. They just wouldn't. She's ours. She's a Democrat. If you're not sure that you hear your priorities, that woman is all over the state. Go where she's going to be and ask her. And she will look you in your eye and she will answer you. We have a real choice, folks. We can continue with incompetence and corruption. We can continue with a person who's faced with the fact that we're number 49 in education and will make a commercial and say that he's turned education around. We can live with that, or we can make a real difference. We can make a real choice. I don't usually come on here and talk about a candidate who's not here to talk about themselves, but I'm here to talk about my beloved Oklahoma. I'm here to say we have got to stop the bleeding, stop the hemorrhaging. And we have a choice, and there is a path to doing that. Thanks for joining me. I'll be back here tomorrow at 4:15. You guys have a great evening.